Hi everyone, this is Jacob out in the gardens here at Udell again, and we are going to talk about wreath season. So everybody's starting to talk about their wreaths to put on their front door or putting up their Christmas tree, and they're finally starting to focus on the evergreens that are in our gardens. And we might have a certain season that's just wreath season or green season, but the evergreen plants in our garden, that's a year-round possibility for screening, wreaths for the winter. But people really need to start focusing on them and adding some into their garden so they don't have to go down to the garden shop and buy a wreath each year, and they can actually make a homegrown wreath right out of their garden. And it really doesn't take that much greenery either. You want a base to your wreath, so something that you have a lot of. If you have a large white pine, this is an oriental spruce right here behind me. Norway spruce work really well for that, but anything that you have a lot of is what you want to start with. And just coming in here and doing some selective pruning. It doesn't take a lot by any means. And when you get done, you want to make sure that you can't really tell that you did any trimming. But that right there, you cut about 6 or 7 clumps that size, and you've already got 90% of your wreath done for, say, like a 14, 16-inch wreath to hang on your front door. So we'll kind of pop around different areas of the garden and show you some of the different greens that you can use for your wreaths or throughout the year in your garden. It wouldn't be a cut green video from here at Udell if we didn't talk about our yew. And this is a great one. You know, this one is large enough that you could actually get a whole wreath off of it, no problem, without being able to tell you cut on it. But the nice thing about some type of greens, like the yew, is if you look at that, that's green. But you can use the same type of green, flip it over, and you get a totally different color from the underside of your needles or your foliage. So when you do this in a wreath, that's a big piece. It looked green, but then you flip it over and you have two types of contrasting colors there that'll give your wreath a lot more pizzazz when it's hanging up. So it's time to start putting your wreath together and cutting your bundles and things like that. But you always want to think of what you have a lot of. So if you have that large Norway spruce, if you're fortunate enough to have a beautiful Nordman fir in your yard, this is a good thing to use for your base. And when I say base, each one of the clumps that you make that goes around your wreath, you want 3 or 4 pieces of something you have a lot of. And then you can come back in with something else like this hemlock or a yew or some other things we'll talk about here in just a bit to embellish. And it doesn't take a lot. So off this Nordman, I would come in here. Got a few pieces that are 6, 8 inches long. And that's a lot of greens. It doesn't look like that much, but when you get into a wreath, you got the green on the top side. The bottom of this Nordman has silver foliage. So if you kind of double them up like that, do both sides facing up, alternate them. Hemlock will give you these nice little small cones. The problem with hemlock that I've found in wreaths, though, is they'll lose their needles pretty quickly. But even if they do, they hold their cones on throughout the end of the year for sure. And you would just come in there and you can zip tie it, you can wire it. If you've got a wreath table, you can clamp it in there, but that's what would go on your wreath ring, your first bundle. You make another bundle that looks just like that, and you lay it over top of it to cover up that ugly, and you just go all the way around your wreath until you're finished. What about some color for your wreath? You want to give it a little bit of a pop while it's hanging on your front door so people can notice it from a sidewalk when they're walking in front of your house. But a lot of people don't know how to tie a bow. They don't like tying a bow, or they just don't like a bow. So there's a lot of stuff in your garden that you can go ahead and cut, work into your wreath, and it doesn't take much, but it'll give you that extra pop of color. This is one of the unusual American hollies that we have here. Most of them will have red berries. This has more of a yellow to a yellow-orange berry. And this year they set really heavy fruit, but it doesn't take much. That one small branch there, we can cut that into 3 pieces. Got to be careful because this stuff is pokey. But you put about 6 pieces of that around a wreath that would be for your door, and that's going to give it a lot of color. You could even incorporate some red twig dogwood or some holly that has different colors. You'll hear me talk a lot about texture and color contrast when making a wreath. And the southern magnolia, like we have here, is one that really does a lot of contrast for a couple of reasons. Not only can you get the fruiting cones here, pods, that have the seeds still hanging on them here that can add a lot of color to your wreath. But you can see that shiny, glossy green like people like to add in. But you flip those leaves over, and especially if you get like a wired pick, where you wire these leaves in individually to your wreath, and you start contrasting them and going back and forth like that. And some of your varieties select cultivars of southern magnolia, like bracken browns. The pubescens on the soft or the underside is a very deep brown color, so they actually look a lot prettier on a wreath. What about something like this for a bow substitute on your wreath? This is just a hydrangea paniculata, so something like your limelight hydrangea, your bobo hydrangea. These bloom on new wood, so you can cut these back this time of year, within a foot or two of the ground, and they'll still continue to flower next year. But you could cut off a couple of these from the summer and incorporate those on top of your wreath, bottom of your wreath, however you'd like to, all the way around your wreath. But that just gives you another plant out of your garden to incorporate into holiday decorations. So this plant is the cream of the crop that people think about when they think berries for Christmas arrangements for your wreaths or your centerpieces and things like that. And what this is deciduous holly. So it's about lost all of its leaves for the year. You give it another week or two, and all these leaves are going to be gone, and the only thing that's going to be left are these huge red berries. This cultivar here is winter red. It has some of the larger berries of the winterberry hollies, but a fantastic plant. And this will, if you don't have these planted in your garden and you have to bring them in from somewhere else, the birds will eat these. I've seen mockingbirds fly up and feed off of wreaths that's been hanging on people's doors. They like to set in the wreath and just fill up their belly. But you can see how bright these are, and it's just a really nice plant to have in your garden or in your wreath. This is one of the plants that people love looking forward to use in mixed arrangements or wreaths in the wintertime, and that's the red twig dogwood. And you can see why, just by the color of the stems here. It gives you so much color and contrast. But a lot of people ask how to prune these to keep nice flushes of new growth that they can use year from year. It's a plant that wants a lot of pruning done to it to keep it the way we want it. And you would never want one of these branches or stems coming up to be more than 2 years old. And I'm going to cut this one off down here and kind of show you why. This is one that was cut last year, and then all of this is new growth from this year. But if you look down here at the base, see, this would be 2 to 3 year old wood. You lose a lot of your red color, and it'll start turning a lot more woody down here, and it's just not that attractive. So coming in here, if you cut half of your stems out this year, next year cut that other half out. So just get on a 2 year cycle to where you're cutting half of it out each year, and you'll always have really nice red stems to use in your arrangements. Some of you might have to worry about the neighborhood kids stealing your wreath off your front porch, right? It's happened. It's unfortunate, but things like that happen. But I have a solution for you. If you plant one of these hardy orange plants, it's in the citrus family. They'll use this as a lot of understock for some of your dwarf citrus that you'll find. It has some of the most wicked thorns on it that you will find on any plant that grows around here. And you incorporate a few of these into your wreath this year, and you're going to know it when that kid comes by in the middle of the night and tries to snatch that thing off your door, because you're going to hear him squall.